Hello, everyone. I'm Dennis Mack, president of the ISTE Teacher Education Network, PLN. I want to welcome all of you to the 5th out of 10 webinars in the series, Championing Technology Infusion in Teacher Preparation. This series is sponsored by ISTE and the ISTE Teacher Education Network. The first 4 webinars have been amazing, and they provided all sorts of great resources and information. This really is a must participate webinar series for anyone working with pre-service teachers. If you missed any of the previous webinars, the recordings, including that of today's webinar, can be found on the webinar registration site. A link to the book chapter being explored today, Preparing Teacher Candidates to Teach Online, will be posted in the webinar chat towards the end of the session. I'm pleased to introduce our presenter today, Michael McVey. Michael has been a familiar face in ISTE for quite some time, and I know you're going to appreciate what he has to share today. So Michael, we are all yours.
Thank you. You gave the short introduction. Thank you for that. That gives me more time to talk. Yeah, I have been heavily involved with ISTE for many years, and now I serve on the board of directors as well. And we just got through with a meeting moments ago in which we were talking about some of the cool things coming up at the ISTE Live 21 conference. And I hope to see many of you there. So a couple of heads ups. Let me just get to the right slide. Do feel free to, are you driving? Pardon me for breaking the fourth wall. Are you driving, Lori, or am I?
You are driving at this point. Go for it.
Good. It was just a little delay. My bad. Well, thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Lori. And yeah, Dennis said no pressure. The last 5 sessions were great, and then there's this one. No, or it'll be. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. So my name is Michael McVey. I'm a professor of education at Eastern Michigan University. And I've been there since 2007. Prior to that, I was at the University of Arizona. And prior to that, I was a K-12 teacher for almost 20 years. I taught in Arizona for 6 of those, and Central and Southern Ontario in Canada for many, many years, and even got a year in Japan along the way too. So I'm delighted to be here. And all the way along, I've been a absolute technology using teacher right from the very first day 40 years ago. My first computer was one of those pets, 35 pounder, and that was my upper body workout for the day, moving them around. I networked computers in my class for the first time, a very rudimentary network. And then I tried keeping up and did the best I could, but I've also along the way did a lot of online teaching, and in its most rudimentary form. Actually, I'll tell you a side note. I received a recognition from Richard Riley. Some of you old timers would remember him, Secretary of Education at the time under the Clinton administration. I created the first website for a school, apparently. And something got word to Richard Riley and company, and I got a little plaque, which immediately disappeared and went into the principal's office, I believe. But years later, they sent me a photocopy of it. So here are the 4 things we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about the most amazing things that have been going on recently with the pandemic, and how preparing to teach students online, teacher educators online, preparing future teachers to teach in an online environment should be the most natural part of the whole infusion process of using technology in their training. They should be thinking about this right from the first day they enter the classroom. And here's why I say that. I've been teaching or preparing new teachers to use technology, my colleagues and I, since, well, for the last 10 years. And I've learned quite a few things along the way. And today is going to be a very practical sort of overview of what I've been doing in the classroom. And I hope that I'll be able to hear some of the impediments that you see toward doing the same sorts of things I'm doing. And maybe you've got some brilliant, wonderful ways that you're doing it better than I ever could. And so I'm looking forward to all of your ideas. So this is how I used to frame it for our students in Michigan. Remember, I told folks behind, we all have a map. We enter Michigan with a map. I live down here in the near Detroit and Ann Arbor, that area. And we always have to be prepared for 3, 4, 5, sometimes as many as 8 snow days where school is closed. In Maine, they have these cool little things called blizzard bags or blizzard packs, where the students the teachers send them home with the kids so that if they have to miss school the next day or 2 or 3, they're prepared. I've been lobbying and arguing for teaching online and creating e-learning days at the state legislature for ages. And the big impediment seems to be that it wasn't equitable because some parts of the state didn't have full internet coverage and others did. So my lobbying and advocacy went to pot, so to speak. And then this fellow rolled into town. And I don't mean to speak at all light of the coronavirus because we have had, one of my daughters had COVID, and you know, it's a horrible, insidious thing, and we've been dealing with it. And of course we all had, I'm gonna say the 2 words I hope to never repeat again, the pivot to online teaching. There, I said that word, now I don't have to say it again, and unprecedented, okay? Now that I've said those 2 words, I don't wanna ever repeat them again. And I'm sure there are other words we're getting sick and tired of as well. So it's funny, Arlene would know this, Arlene Borthwick, who's one of the editors of the book, well, you all would. We were in Atlanta at the AACTE conference to talk about the book. We had a panel presentation, and I was going to try to make the case that learning how to teach in an online environment was essential to our teachers. It was the very, very day that every school in Japan was shut down because of COVID. At which point I said, I rest my case. Any questions? Before I didn't even have to say anything. I did not have to make the case. But let me tell you how we did it. One of the things we try to do at Eastern Michigan University Teachers College is to create shared experiences. We're trying to develop the same sort of a common language to talk about a variety of things. Now, the list I'm about to click through are phrases and terms that we have used in meetings, more or less, and there really should be ranked in order from what's the most basic of terms to what's is really more relevant and current right now. And you all will figure out what I mean in just a minute or two. So some of the terms that we use. If you're unfamiliar with any of these, I invite you to do a little more investigation and chit chat and find out. Transactional distance. We talk to the kids, or I'm going to say the kids occasionally. We talk to our teacher candidates and talk about this idea of the transactional distance, the fact that I can stand in the classroom, give an instruction, look around and instantly see who's got it, who's struggling by facial gestures, by noise, by outbursts, by how immediate they get down to working on the task and walking around, observing, that sort of thing. I asked the students, well, how can you, online education means that their students could be 30 minutes away or 300 miles away or just in the next room. How do you address this issue of, the transactional distance that you have to overcome? And that's a tool we use to start thinking about this. We talk about collaborative activities in the classroom, and then the questions start coming up in our teacher education classrooms. Well, how can we do a collaborative activity in an online environment? Well, that is a bit of a shorter putt these days. Students are more familiar with tools like Flipgrid and Google Docs, and sharing. The idea of sharing a doc is not a brand new concept anymore. We talk about, and I was actually surprised about this, I'll tell you that word, curation. We talk about the curation of resources. Teachers are becoming curators. There are so many tools out there, so many resources, that it's not a matter of reinventing brand new from whole cloth digital resources that we can use in the classroom. Instead, teachers are becoming more of a curator role. And when I mentioned this word curating to my students, I was quite startled to find out that they weren't quite familiar with that word. They talked about cure, meaning like healthy. At least they weren't talking about pork, but they talked about, some of them just absolutely did not know that word. So I said, okay, here's a concept we need to talk about. And later we'll talk about some of the tools we use for teaching that. The next part of this is we try to come up with some common tools and applications. It took me ages, but I finally got a lot of my colleagues in my department to use Inspiration. And sadly, Inspiration is no longer with us. Great tool for graphical organizers and concept mapping. There are other tools out there. We're talking now interactive whiteboards, and we're trying to come up with tools and things that our teachers can share and use. Video editing, simplest tools possible. I use a tool called Camtasia. They're comfortable with, they used to be comfortable with Movie Maker from Microsoft. Now they're comfortable with WeVideo and Video Ant and others. I believe that Liz Kolb mentioned that one in her presentation. Then we start coming into other interesting issues, device interoperability, the fact that I had a student once give me all sorts of materials, digital resources in her online lesson that she was creating that had, that were in Flash. And of course, Flash also is seen better days. In fact, it's gone. Issues, common language. We talked about the digital divide, and that has been replaced recently with the term homework gap. Students who can't do certain work online because they are away. I used to have students say, teacher candidates say they didn't want to do anything online simply because they knew about this digital divide, and they said, well, not everyone can use it, so I'm not going to do it. They didn't work very hard at coming up with solutions to that issue. And of course, now that the pandemic has been with us, that COVID homework gap has been tightened up a little bit with more Wi-Fi hotspots and that sort of thing. We'll talk about some basic conceptual frameworks. My department head was so excited by, by law, I'm supposed to hold this book up. She was so excited by the book and one of the conceptual frameworks that I'm going to talk about a little later that she purchased 10 copies for our department. I haven't seen those distributed yet. I'm looking forward to that. Also, as we move along, we discover there are all sorts of, this is a brave new world. Students used to have to say, excuse me, Dr. McElroy, can I record this class? You know, I have an accommodation, here's my letter, or I just want to record because it helps me learn better. Now that they're in Zoom, some professors absolutely do not like the recording, and others have had to wrap their heads around, well, what are the new policies we need to bring in on recording inside Zoom? Classroom management and online environment. I'm glancing at the time, so I'm going to zip ahead a bit. So we talk about formative assessments, authentic assessments, and interestingly, my students now, my teacher educators are very, very, very concerned about engagement. They know that, so going right back to the top, transactional distance, they know that when the students are apart from them and they can't be bright and charming and cheerful face to face, and a lot of the older students turn off their cameras. You've seen those dark rooms of blackened screens, sometimes for a really good reason, I have to say. The idea of engagement is something that they've understood now, and I have to ramp up my own training to talk about that. So let's talk about what it is we actually do. But before I go too deeply into this, here are two questions that I want you to think about the back of your head while we're having this little conversation, and I'm sharing some of my insights. Before we go into a breakout room, what are the impediments to preparing teacher candidates to teach online in your institution? And some of you, I'm sure, are just have all sorts of ideas. And then the second question, and this is where I'm really looking forward to some brilliant ideas and insights, is how have you or your program worked to overcome these impediments? What have you done? What have you changed? And while you think about this, I wanted to tell you another little side story. I ran into one of my students at a conference. He was very excited. He said, McVey, and I wrote about this in the book. He said, McVey, I am never going to teach first period math with direct instruction ever again. And you know, okay, yeah, sure. What are you talking about, kid? And he says, I use a tool called Edpuzzle. And I said, all right, tell me more. What he does is because they have had horrible busing in downtown Detroit where he was living, the kids were dribbling into his classrooms throughout the morning based on the buses. And he said, well, that's crazy. We can't do this anymore. So he flipped his classroom using a tool called Edpuzzle. And I know I don't have to explain flipping classrooms to you all, but he created his videos had the students review them before they came to class. And of course, as soon as they came in, they just put their stuff down and they went right into the project of the day. No direct instruction of the concept. And if they needed it, and he says the side benefit is if they didn't get it the first time, they could look at it over and over in the corner till they got it in his math class, and it worked for him. So anyway, I just want to share that little story. That's one of the things that really got me motivated to learning more about how to put classes online and how students are actually handling it. This is my university. This is taken a little while ago. I'm a drone flyer, so I took it up to the great stone water tower that we have in Ypsilanti, and this is Eastern Michigan. So what I'm going to do is walk you through what we do and how we train our teacher candidates to teach in an online environment. I kind of boiled it down to 5 key elements. The first, I have to minimize this so I can see me too. So one of the key elements is, first of all, students, you've got to master the basic tools. You need to wrap your head around how to share a document, how to set up a document, how to add images, all those are the basic stuff. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, at just what students don't know about. They think they know technology. I asked them at the start of the semester to rank themselves on a scale of 0 to 1 to 10. 1 meaning, ooh, what's this shiny object you put in front of me? Yeah, I know nothing. 2, yeah, Bill Gates, I'm on Bill Gates' speed dial. He calls me all the time when he's stuck, So, but somewhere in the middle is that sweet spot where we're trying to get the students to show me their mastery of tools. The next is we provide a lot of low stakes applications of these tools. Hey, I'd like you to try this. I want you to build a permission form, use Google Forms, create this thing in Google Docs, make a self-introduction PowerPoint, things like that, that are really not particularly challenging, but, and won't be graded with any degree of difficulty. The big challenge is at the end of the course, low stakes, get their feet in. Some students are, this is easy peasy McVey. And I say, you know what, that's great. See if you can push the envelope. And oh, I've made hundreds of PowerPoints. I says, have you ever added narration? Have you ever included video? Have you ever tried animating this, that, and the other thing? And they go, oh, okay, I guess I could push the envelope a bit. So we push the envelope. And they're all coming in, it's this Swiss cheese. They're all coming in with various holes in their skill sets. Next step up, we talk then about curation tools to handle all the flood of digital resources. They find out very, very quickly as they build toward the final project. And the final project is this. They have to create an online learning experience that could last from 2 hours to 3 hours of work for their students in their imaginary classroom. There were a lot of workarounds we figured out over the years. An English teacher said, well, I want them to read a book, so that's going to take at least 5 hours. And he said, yeah, but you can assume the book has been read, or you can assume they've already read this particular act or scene in Shakespeare. Or for the youngest kids, hey, you're writing to the caregivers or the parents, and they're going to be your tag team. You're going to be able to work with them. Minimize the language or get it age-appropriate language on the websites that you're taking them to, but understand that the kids aren't going to know things like, I had one teacher say, I'm going to have my students take pictures of various shapes around their house and upload them to the website. And I went, let's talk a little about cognitive load and skills and the digital divide in that point. A lot of times kids don't have those tools. There's so much going on behind the scenes in that simple act of uploading an image to a place that they hadn't considered before. And we've got some workarounds that I may end up sharing with you. Next is the interactivity part. So we're talking about how to engage the kids, how to engage the children in your classroom. My teacher candidates then have to become more comfortable with interactivity. If you're going to work with a group of students online and they're going to be off-site, in an online setting, you're going to have to interact with them using whichever tools you can figure out are going to work for you. What I don't do with them is I don't say, I say, okay, go to this website, answer these questions and come back. That's like, read the book and answer these questions. That's not real teaching anymore, as far as I'm concerned. And they'll encounter that in their schools, which is fine, but I need them to start thinking about ways that the students can interact with each other, interact with you, interact with the broader community. become better digital citizens. And we do talk about that. We talk about the ISTE educator standards. So finally, there are a lot of tools. The kids in my class, the teacher candidates in my class come from all over. They want to be high school geometry teachers, or physics teachers. They want to be kindergarten teachers. They want to be everything in between. So not every tool is appropriate for every student. And I'll give you some examples a bit later, but here's an easy one. Seesaw. I have seen Seesaw.me in classrooms all over the place, and absolutely essential to have these tools to understand how the basics of Seesaw works. I've watched students record themselves reading, and I share this with the students. I record themselves reading. They have their paper, they press record, they speak, they review to make sure that it was recorded properly. Click a button and it ends up in the teacher's email box in Seesaw, and the teacher can then review it, keep a running record of how their skills have developed over time, and send this out to the parents, use it for review during parent-teacher meetings, which happen virtually these days. But along the way, I'm asking students to become really, really comfortable with 2 or 3 or 4 tools, depending on how long the section is. They need to develop their personal toolbox. So I also make a lot of videos for the kids called rookie mistakes, so that I don't want to spend time making the same mistakes over and over. And I do not teach gotcha classes. Oh, you put the totals and you put the averages in the same graph, and that's going to mess up whatever you're doing. So I point out some rookie mistakes, and it's very low key, and I'm away from the situation, because remember, some of your students are going to be actually a little tech wary, and they need to have the low stakes. They need to have help along the way. And I have heard from students over the past 2 years since I started doing this that it's made a big difference for them. Here are some of the tools that our students have used in my classroom that they've wrapped their heads around, some of which I never use at all. For example, Empatico. You can connect classes, like you can do it with Skype. And there are almost every one of these tools here has some analog or some other tool out there that kids can use. And you might totally wrap your head around, but let's talk about Empatico for a second. I got feedback from one of my graduates from a year and a half ago. She said, I set up my class with a school in Los Angeles. In the morning, they do Spanish. In the afternoon, they do Japanese. And my kids in my classroom, she said, are suddenly saying, oh, it's really neat to see native English speakers attempting to speak in foreign languages. And they have great conversation. And these are kids in LA who don't know much about snow. So the Michiganders have a lot of fun with telling them what frostbite is all about. Frostbite. Anyway, tools like these, I just say, pick something, anything from Plickers to Padlet, and become a mini expert in those tools. And don't just tell me how they could work in your class. Show me something you could do with those tools when you become a teacher. Another thing that I engage my students with is as a mini side class, I offer them a chance to become certified as a Google educator, certified educator level 1. It cost them $10. I couldn't get the dean to kick in the cash for tests for everyone. And it's an interesting experience. By the time we're done with the class, they know enough that I know they can pass this exam. And I've now seen about 20 or 30 students go through and pass the exam. And they've got this cool little badge they can add to their resume. And if you aren't familiar with it, I'm happy to talk about that later during any of the Q's and A's. But myself, I'm at level 1. I did level 2, and then moved up to trainer and coach. And Google certified coach is something a lot of you might be interested in wrapping your head around. Sorry, I said Google. And suddenly my phone kicked into high gear, and I talked about Alexis, a student, and my Alexa kicked into high gear as well. So my apologies for the distraction. Anyway, happy to talk about that. And to find the highest level in the Google certification is a Google Innovator. And they've changed the rules now, so even people like me could become Google Innovators. So let's talk about some of the theoretical models that we use. I know in this series, it's my dog. I know in this series we've talked about SAMR or SAMR, I've heard some people refer to it, substitution, augmentation, modification, and redesign. Some of you even go all the way back and use the Dwyer model, Dwyer and Ringgold, and talk about how technology gets integrated into the classroom, which led eventually to the technology integration matrix and Liz Kolb's wonderful triple E framework. There are all sorts of, pick a lane, pick a concept and run with it. TPAC, and we may be even honored today by having some of the originators of TPAC in this session. And this is not COL, this is COI. And I know that Teresa Folger, who was on, talked about this. We're not sure what to call this, COI. I'm going to call it COI, or Community of Inquiry. And that Community of Inquiry model looks a lot like this. And you see, it looks very similar to TPAC. This is Archambault, and oh my gosh, I should have remembered this. The Archer. Oh, we'll go back and look at that later. I'm sure some of you are clicking away right now and going to inform me in the chat. So there are 3 presences that we talk about in our class, the cognitive presence, the teaching presence, and the social presence, and there's a lot of overlap. When I talk about the cognitive presence with my kids, it's very much like TPAC, the content. You know this stuff, future teachers, you know your content. You're going to be a physics teacher. You know that. I'm not going to teach you physics. I get lost with force, rise, run, all that stuff. And the mathematics, they laugh at me because I don't know SOHCAHTOA. And if you're a math teacher or a mathemagician, you know that one. So they've got the cognitive. We're talking the teaching presence primarily, how to become more focused on as the teacher in the online environment. And finally, the last one, and the reason we use this is this idea of the social presence, the green circle up there. This is where engagement comes in. How do you engage with the students? How do you set the tone or the class climate, even though those students are far, far away from you? And it used to be very theoretical. And I go on, I've got a table in the book that, in the chapter, which you'll get a chance to see, that does a little crosswalk between these presences and some of the things the activities you might do in your class. Is there anything else I absolutely had to say about that? Not yet. We also have been starting to talk recently and are trying to boil it down. I always try to boil things down. And some of you are familiar with Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. And there are a series of questions. And of course, the first question is like the what. What do I have to teach? Sometimes they'll be told what to teach. Don't worry about that. Then there's the how. How am I going to do it? We talk a great deal about the how in my class, but also to boil it right down. When students are having issues, it's because they haven't figured out the why. Why are they trying to teach what they're teaching in the online environment? And you'll find that they're all, if they have a firm grasp on the why, that going to the others, the hows, the tools that they bring in and utilize, they have a much better understanding of how to use those tools in their online teaching and online learning environment. By the way, we used to use Moodle. When I first started this in 1999 at University of Arizona, I used Blackboard as the learning management system. And then we moved over to D2L. And then we have used Moodle because it was free and running on a server in the back of somebody's office that he had quite forgotten about. Now we're using Google Classroom. The whole course itself is run on Canvas. So, we all have our own learning management systems. And that's another thing I've heard Barry Fishman at University of Michigan would say, or MSU, I forget which one he's at. He's, teach the verb, not the noun. To the students, teach them what they're going to do with the technology, not the nuts and bolts of how the tool works. So let's talk about this final online learning experience. Here are some of the key elements that I look for. And after we go through this and share a couple more things, we'll go to this little breakout room. The introduction. And by the way, I'm a Quality Matters trained person as well. They have, if you're familiar with Quality Matters, that's a group that you might want to look into. They have 42 separate standards, and 5 of them are key pillars. And one of the most important takeaways from that I'm bringing to my students is my teacher candidates in their online lesson need to have an introduction. They need to talk to the students. They need to interact with the students. They need to show them how they can get out of sticky situations. If they need help, how do you get contacted? That's a snap. It's remarkable when someone comes along who doesn't know how to do that. It's startling, but it does happen. And some of you are going to recognize this framework as well. We then talk about an anticipatory set. Get the students excited. Let them know what's coming up. We've got all sorts of examples now. But one interesting thing is the students say, okay, in my online experience, I'm going to have them watch a video. And I say, how do you know they've watched it? How do you know they're interacting with it? Well, then we start talking about Edpuzzle. And then we say, well, you got to give them something to look for and spell it out. You need some sort of that's when the interactivity comes in. And they go, oh, yeah, I get that. Then we get to a direct instruction. I mean, I don't care if they follow this precisely, which ASIR or ADDIE or whatever model they use to construct or backward design. But I want them to come up with some sort of a direct instruction where they're going to actually teach a lesson, where the quotation marks, teach a lesson. How are they doing that? And this is where the interesting conversations happen, interesting interactions happen. Some of my younger teachers say, well, I want to use the 5 E's: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And you know what? They match up really closely to all the other things we're doing. For example, guided practice. I'm looking for a kind of a guided practice experience so that you can have a lot of formative assessment and evaluation of what the students are doing, followed by independent practice where they're working on their own or in small groups towards some goal. And finally, if they're interested, a synthesis or extension activity. We talk about formative assessment, we talk about summative assessment as well. So at which point I think we pretty well have covered everything that the students need to wrap their heads around in order to have a decent functional lesson of some sort. And honestly, I have had everything from preparing for the trip to the zoo in a kinder class, all the way up to and I'm going to mess this up, all the way up to slopes and transformations in geometry, to the Cold War, to political cartoons, to you name it. And everything from The Outsiders to a really interesting look at William Shakespeare, one of the scenes from Romeo and Juliet, and comparing it with, was it Hogwarts? I can't remember. Anyway, what I'd like to do is this, and thank you for listening to me for a whole 30 minutes. By the way, if you've never done this before and you with a QR code, and I put my face in the middle of it, and I wonder if it actually still works. Let me just see. Oh, good, it works. QR codes have about a 30% error rate, so you can mess around with almost every feature of the QR code and put yourself right in the middle of it, put your own logo. We also have a link to the breakout room. Tell you what I'll do is I'm going to click on it right now, and I'll go back and share the link with you in the chat room. And so the two questions are, they should be on this document, and the questions are basically this. Once Lori sends us off into the rooms, what do you perceive as the impediments to getting your teacher educators prepared to teach in an online environment? Think of it in terms of your own institution. And secondly, and talk infusion if you can. And the second element is, well, and you can skip the first one if you really just want to talk about the second one. How have you or your program worked to overcome these impediments? I'm looking for ideas from you. And if you think the whole concept of teaching in an online environment is ridiculous, let me talk to you a little bit about the residual or the skills that the students end up walking away with as they prepare to learn how to teach in an online environment. Everything from using the tools that they're going to use with the students anyway, the collaborative tools, the interactivity, the curation tools, everything from, like I said, Padlet to Flickrs. When all the dust has settled, they walk away saying, well, this is not a really good lesson that I created, but wow, I learned a lot of things along the way. So I'll leave that with you. I'm really interested to hear back from you in, let's say, 15 minutes from now at the most. If that's too long, Lori, make it shorter and we'll go from there. So I'm going to let Lori take over at this point and talk about instructions.
Great. I'm going to open up the rooms. You should see a banner come up to click to join. If you get stuck, I can move you into one of the rooms.
I really appreciate it. I had a great conversation in the last group, and now I get a chance to see so many of the faces of people. Let me just look around for a second. I recognize so many of you. Wonderful. And one of these days I'm going to meet some of you in 3D. If you recognize me, because I'm going to have my ISTE board guy thing at the next ISTE conference. I'm really looking forward to it. The next live one, we hope, fingers crossed, is going to be New Orleans. So see you down in Nolans. So can anyone share it in the most, I'm going to look at the notes you all left behind later, but if anyone wants to share the most fascinating thing that popped out during your discussions, that would be wonderful. You're all optimistic about the future, right? Maybe not so.
Yes.
Oh, who said yes? You're optimistic. Thank you.
Michael, I'll share. This is Kevin. I just had one thing I shared with my group, very current. So about 3 years ago, a colleague and I created an online teaching methods course. This was pre-COVID. We offered it in the spring semester, I believe, had about 9 teachers enroll in it. It was only offered as an elective. It is not offered as a required course. There's no room in any of our degree programs to make it required. We offered it this spring semester in the middle of a pandemic. 0 students enrolled in the course. So it's a sign of the times where, on the one hand, I know, thank you. On the one hand, you know, we're all preaching and doing what we can to offer more PD, right, for both in-service and pre-service. But on the other hand, we have candidates who are just so maxed out with credits and courses that they're only focused on their degree plan and cannot take for other, you know, electives for various reasons, time commitments, financial reasons, et cetera. But it was a very interesting and eye-opening semester to see 0 students enroll.
Am I sighing loudly enough? Can you hear that sigh? I was sharing with my group, I created a very short 5-week course called Improving Online Teaching and offered it to faculty as a sort of a focus group at one point. Everything from, you know, the basics of how to teach online. And then the pandemic happened and we went from 15 to 150 and then to 170. And so I feel pretty lucky that my people are prepared at my university, but I can't, I don't know, Kevin, that's the sound of somebody digging a hole and putting their head right in the sand and covering it up. I can't comprehend that. Anyway, does anyone have an option?
I would just like to say, I think it speaks to the importance of this infusion model, because you don't have the bandwidth to take on extra at this time, or really any time. I mean, I just think it's so important that all of those methods and strategies and everything should be taught throughout and scaffold for our teacher prep students.
I cannot disagree.
Michael, can I share something?
I wish you would.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have been thinking a lot about how to teach. Like, I'm happy with my content and I'm happy with how technology is embedded, but I'm thinking about how I interact with students and how to help them grow and develop a stronger sense of self-agency surrounding technology. And I think that's going to be the next area that I dabble in related to this whole technology infusion effort. But if you look at chapter 11, you'll see we've been looking at ideas of accountability and assessment of teacher candidates. I see Michael. That's Ray Buss's chapter, and I was a co-author with him on the studies behind that chapter. we looked at the theory of planned behavior to determine, to develop an assessment that teacher candidates take that look at their intentionality, their future intentionality. And it's based on the new focal point in the TPAC framework on context. So if students can imagine themselves comfortably teaching in future contexts, right? And we don't know what those contexts are now that we've had this experience in the rapid move to online. They know that, you know, things could shake up. So that sense of self-efficacy is pretty strong. Anyway, what I wanted to bring up is, you know, we can't do this alone, right? We can't do this in a siloed approach. And this is bigger than me and bigger than any one or even a handful of people surrounding a preparation program. So building capacity is something that I'm struggling with currently and trying to figure out how to get more people genuinely committed to their own content, as well as to helping support technology for teacher candidates along the way. So.
Yeah.
Self-agency.
Say that again, self-agency?
I just, you know, I just had a little sideline story. We did the survey last week and a student emailed us and said, I'm not getting enough. One student out of, you know, however many we have out there, I'm not getting enough technology represented in my coursework. And I thought, I want to see every student emailing me with that comment, right? In the future, I want all of them to care that they're not getting enough technology. And I want all of them to see how, even if an assignment doesn't have technology woven into it or wrapped around it, they might be able to add it, right? Because they care about it.
Well, with 1 minute and 10 seconds left, let's go to Tammy.
Hi, I just want to say, so I'm an adjunct at ASU, and they did a really wonderful job of offering these great workshops, 1-hour workshops, starting last spring all the way through and continuing, where they taught faculty tools. And I found that when I went to teach my methods class, then I would take a tool and I would use it to teach the class. And I would make sure that I taught a new tool by teaching the students content with the tool. And then I had students who turned in projects using all these tools when I didn't even ask them to. And it was really exciting. And I think it's really that buy-in, you know, that we were kind of forced to go online in the beginning, but really offering those rich opportunities. And it was really fun to take these workshops. And there was a sense of community built. And then as educators, we went into our classrooms with our students, and it made teaching them online so much more fun and engaging.
Oh, sure.
And I just think it was, I think that was really successful. I just wanted to leave on a success.
I like that. In fact, it's funny. I sometimes will just throw in a tool and just use it without any comment. This year it was Jamboard. I just said, oh, hey, everyone, let's go to this Jamboard and we're going to do this and this and this. And at the end, for the first time, I had like 12 of the 50 students say, add a Jamboard activity in their online lesson, which was fantastic. Here's what I'd like to say in the last 10 seconds. And thank you so much for all coming here today. It was so nice to meet you all or see your faces. I've been telling people that this group of teachers that we're putting out now they know contextualized, they know they have to prepare for everything from online to hybrid to virtual, like it's to face-to-face. And I believe that this is a group of students who are actually going to be remarkable teachers when the rubber hits the road, if we do the training right. And I know you all out there are doing the training right so far. So thank you for attending today. Did you want to wrap anything up, Lori? Are you the anchor speaker here?
Sure. Yes, thank you. This was a great conversation. As my day job is Technology Infusion, so I absolutely love that we're talking about this, and I want to add to your list of tech tools some other ones that I think are fabulous to use. But I do hope that all of you continue this conversation and join us for our next session in 2 weeks. You'll have all that information. I believe Emily's going to put that link in the chat to be able to sign up for others as well. In the chat, there's also a link to download chapter 6, so you can read all about what Michael explained today. And we really thank you all for coming.
Send me that list. I want it, you know. There's always something. I was on the Google's Arts and Culture, did a walkthrough yesterday. Oh my gosh, wonderful, wonderful stuff. So yeah, nice to see you all.